Ladies and gentlemen, he is architect, Estonian Information System Authority. Please welcome, with a warm applause, Heiko Vainsalu. Welcome.
Good morning. I have to start with an excuse. I really tried with the first 40 minutes to learn the Swedish, but I wasn't very successful. It turns out Swedish people are at least as polite as the Estonians, because you see when in Tallinn, when some foreigner goes to an Estonian asking for directions and even starts to think of talking in Estonian, then the Estonians immediately turn to the language the person actually speaks as a native language. I don't care if it's Russian, Swedish, Finnish, or Swahili. Estonians always fell into the other person language. So, as my Estonian is not very good and my Swedish is not fluent yet, I have to stick with English for this session. I hope you bear it with me, and if I'm not making very much sense, then please forgive me, and after the presentation you can come to me and ask that, what did you really mean with that? My name is Heiko, as it says on the slides. I would have to add to the introduction that when I first came across X-Road somewhere in 2002, I think, I thought that it was the worst idea that anybody had to come off. These people who invented it were stupid, most likely Estonians, and I wouldn't trust them. After 2 years, I understood what the point was. I became a true believer, and after another 7 years, I became some sort of one of the spokesperson for X-Road. So, in this sense, I'm a little bit embarrassed what happened to me in the first time when I saw X-Road, but well, I've come to this place that now I have to speak about X-Road in Sweden, in Stockholm, which is very nice, actually. So, as X-Road was already mentioned, I have like 2 exercises for the morning. Not that only I would have to stand up and move here, but rather so that you would also have something to do. So I understood there was a query platform made for you. Question very simple to initially set to the crowd here is, when comparing to Sweden, do you think Estonia is a big country or a small country? I have to say it's a tricky question, right? Okay, so if this platform is still available, you can put your answers then there, because later on you can see that how many of you were wrong and how many of you were right. Another question I would have to make, or this kind of statement, is that as X-Road has been mentioned several times already, then I got the feeling in the first 40 minutes that X-Road is somewhat known platform already here in Sweden. So maybe if anybody feels that they are quite confident and understand what X-Road is about and how it works, then maybe you could just raise, like, I don't know, both hands or one hand at least. Okay, I should have asked it the other way around, then most of you would have the possibility to have an exercise. Okay, then I still have something to present about. How do I change the slides? This is the tricky question. Here. Aha, okay. So, here's the first question, right. I hope you had a few minutes now to think about if Estonia compared to Sweden is bigger or smaller, or what would be the right answer to the question if Estonia is a big or small country. The right answer is actually on the image here, because what you see there is that all the countries are about the same size. Well, what the hell is he talking about there? He is coming from Estonia, they don't have any land area, they don't have any population, they don't have any gross national product or happiness or whatever they are producing there. So how they can be at the same size as the Kingdom of Sweden? For me, as I'm coming from the e-governance sector, and from the public sector, the right answer comes from the fact that just as in Estonia, there is in Sweden a Ministry of Social Welfare and the functions, there is a Ministry of Education and its functions, there is Ministry of Defense and all of its public services. I know some countries that can handle having a country without Ministry of Defense, but there are only a few cases. So having this kind of qualitative spectrum, all the countries have the same size. You just have more citizens or more land area where to provide these services, but on qualitative terms, the countries are the same size. So we are the same size. Fine. But the issue is that we in Estonia at least are a small country also in some terms. We have very few people. And those on the image, those are actual Estonians, quite gray and not very focused, and standing in a queue, actually, waiting for something. I don't know how common it is in Sweden or how welcome it is, but at least what we have seen in Estonia, that as we have the same size of, functionally the same size of country as, for example, Sweden, we have less people to serve this country. So we have to do something about how to sustain the country. And when thinking of a nation or government or country, then this is something that we think we like to have. I don't know if we actually want to have, but we, at least in Estonia, think that we would like to have our own country. We had it, we lost it for a while, then we found it again. Now we think it's still a good idea. Let's have our own country. But it's bloody expensive, right? So how to deal with the country if you don't have sufficient amount of resources? So the idea would be that how to sustain the country in a way that it would be effective, so that it would be cheaper, because we don't have too much resources, we have to do it cheap. And something we figured out some time ago, and that is a hot topic now in the EU is the magnificent term of doing stuff once only. I collect data from the citizens once only, and then collect data from the entrepreneurs once only. And this seems to be like a focus in EU. Is it the same in Sweden? Yes, okay. Okay, but I'll come back to the once only principle a little bit later. First of all is that maybe what to discuss is about the countries. If you want to have your country, you want it to be existing, to survive, to be sustainable in whatever kind of aspects or items might fall out from the heavens. So this is something that we have learned or think of, that we have figured out, that if you want something to be sustainable, you have to have, or you have to, in e-governance way, have to implement it using distributed architecture. Okay, second question to the audience. Do you know what distributed architecture is? If you know, okay, make a notion. I'll come to give my own definition a little bit in a few slides. First of all, I can explain what is not the distributed architecture. A very close thing that is not distributed architecture is a monoculture agricultural implantation, like the banana plantation. It's if some disease breaks in, the whole plantation is dead, right? So you don't want to have the same kind of culture all and over again. So you must have some kind of differences. Even the worst idea would be having a single culture, having a single e-governance system that would run your country, because this is the single point of failure that everybody who would like to harm your country can be focused on. So in these terms, we figured out something that we have named distributed architecture. Now, who has a good definition about distributed architecture? I don't know what's the definition. I think I grasp the idea what a distributed architecture is, but to define, to actually like go into debate with somebody, I don't know, I'm not very good with it. But I know somebody who is really good in distributed architecture. Actually, two people. One of them is 8, other is 10. Both are, have the same family name as mine. And just 2 days ago, in the evening, they had created a magnificent distributed architecture in their room. The books were under the bed. Schoolwork was on top of the cupboard. Plans were taken off the windows and put also on the board. And clothes were not in the cupboard, but rather on top of bed. So for every grown-up, it is what? A mess, right? And kids are really good in creating mess. But do the kids themselves feel that this is a mess? No. But where's the trick? Right? For us, it seems a problem. For them, it seems like a quite natural way of how things can be. The trick is that when you try to go into their room and take that, no, I want the book be on the cupboard. No, don't touch it. I know that it's there. It must stay there. So I think this is the key. In this kind of distributed architecture, and this is just a nice way to say that we have a mess, you know where everything is. You don't have to set them in specific places, but you have to know where they are. And if somebody moves them, you have to, let's say, register them in your mind at least. So in this sense, distributed architecture is a mess, and we don't want to make too much order in it, or at least we can present order in this kind of mess. So, implementing a mess, politely said, distributed architecture in Estonian e-governance, we have figured out a way that the government is distributed across the country, across different authorities, and something we have to do about it, how to keep it organized, how to keep it in well-positioned order, is that we have to deal with two aspects, interoperability and security. I think interoperability is something that you will discuss today here all day long. A very good and reasonable thing to discuss about, but what we have been focusing at least as hard, maybe if not even more, is the information security, data security, cybersecurity, whatever kind of security you can make of. So what is the security and why is it needed of? One of my chiefs in a few years ago, one of the best experts claimed to be in Europe on terms of cybersecurity, said in a very narrow way that brakes are needed to drive fast. And they just said it like that. Of course, in Estonian, in our work environment, in one of the meetings, without any other context, just that brakes are needed to drive fast. And it took me 2 years to understand what he meant with it. So if you have handbrakes and driving brakes and seatbelt and the airbags and everything like that, it's really good, right? But it's not reasonable if you stay at home. So if you have all those things, then use them and go and drive fast. Because you have the brakes, you have the airbags, you can do things in a faster way because you have the brakes. So information security is the same thing. You must have information security in place in order to make quick changes. Because if something turns sour, something's got rotten in Denver, then you can have the brakes. You can limit the process. So, we have the distributed architecture, we are dealing with interoperability, we are dealing with information security. When does the guy here now in front start to speak about X-Road, right? Interesting also for me. So in this kind of e-governance model that we have implemented in Estonia, the good things are happening with different kind of public services and applications that are interoperable and have their own a way of providing their business service to the citizen, to the entrepreneur, in one way or the other, to the same people that you saw beforehand standing in a queue. But to have this kind of good applications in a fast way, in a secure way, is that you have to have for this a set of enablers. I have here just on the chart a few of them settled. I would like to discuss some of them and then go into a little bit more detail with data exchange, because this is something I know the best of. First of the things is that if you are running an e-governance sector, you must be able to electronically identify objects, subjects, things. Everything must be identifiable. But this is not just as simple. Just in the morning I had a discussion with a lady here who claimed something that is done here in Sweden that I said, well, is it reasonable? The tricky part is that when the government provides physical identity for a citizen, then how the hell is it possible that different companies are providing digital identity for a citizen? It doesn't match for me. You must have a strong digital identity for a citizen also. And not only for citizen, for the cars, for the land, for houses, for pets, I don't know. Once in Estonia, we even had a register that contained unidentified bodies. So we were able to identify unidentifiable objects. But let it be. So you must have a way to identify, and you must know who is the one that is identifying. So this comes to the other enabler, that is responsibility management. You have to know who is responsible for what. And the tricky part is that, of course, you cannot have two or more parties being responsible for the same thing at the same time, right? It wouldn't make sense if we would have 3 moderators in this room here. You must have one who is responsible for moderating. And if I start to go over my time, then she has to stand up and say that, no, sorry, you have to go off the stage, right? You cannot do it several people at the same time. The hardest enabler, at least on this diagram, is the social digital trust, or trust digital. I would even say trust digital, because this is a social enabler. How to make citizens, entrepreneurs, people actually believe and trust the way of digital services, how they are being provided. I don't know if there are any examples in Sweden in terms that some people don't trust the digital world. In Estonia, we have the anecdote that old ladies go to the bank ATMs, take their money out and bring it to bank because they don't trust the ATMs, right? I have even a worst case scenario in work, in the good terms. One of my colleagues, who is 10 years younger than me, said a month ago that he is, if possible, doesn't give written signatures because he doesn't trust it. He says that the only trustworthy signature that he gives is electronical. The paper written, everybody can do these jots and stuff. Who can prove anything on this? Doesn't work out. So the youngsters in Estonia have acclaimed this kind of culture and understanding that digital stuff is trustworthy. Of course, there has to be cryptographic and different PKI schemes and blockchains and whatever kind of things you can make of. And all the people don't have to understand, but you make them make this stuff trustworthy. In addition to those that are on the picture, API management, information security, money governance and money, how it is distributed, other aspects that are needed to deal also as enablers. None of them provide a value of their own, but they are enablers to create this kind of top-level business services that are well and good provided in a digital e-government way. Now, coming to the data exchange, once you have all the data identified, you know who is responsible for any kind of data, you have to solve the interoperability. You have to be able to exchange the data between different authorities, different data owners, in a way that it wouldn't need any paperwork, it wouldn't need too much manual work. And this is what we some time ago figured out the X-Road is about. What is, I think, the most important thing? Just as all of the other enablers, X-Road also is an organizational enabler. It's not so much a technical, but rather organizational, somewhat legal, and of course it has some bits in technology also. But it's not the technology that can solve organizational issues. It is the organizational issue. X-Road as a technological solution is in GitHub if anybody wants. go and download, install it, you have it. But I won't say it doesn't make anything better for you yet. So the X-Road, in this sense, in the e-governance system of Estonia, is something that actually doesn't do very much. It does very few, very seldom things. It's something that preserves the responsibilities of all of the authorities, of all of the data owners, but making them interoperable, making them possible to use each other's data across public internet in a way that security-related aspects wouldn't be broken. So in this sense, X-Road, a peer-to-peer, a secure data exchange platform, something to preserve the responsibilities. I think, for me at least, this has been like the cornerstone or the heart of the X-Road. Now to go a little bit more into the detail, as I said, peer-to-peer authorities, then I have seen many people who have been discussing that they say, oh yeah, we have the X-Road solution in our country also. And when we go into discussions, what do they have? Then it turns out that they have some kind of centralized ESP that is proxying and bypassing all the services. This is exactly what X-Road is not. It's not a basket full of all the eggs. It's not a single point of failure. It's something to avoid single point of failures. The main function for the X-Road is then to securely pass data from one authority to another, from one information system to another. In security, in this term, I have in mind the availability, confidentiality, integrity. The availability is something that we try not to harm at all. As it's distributed, we don't have any single point failures. The services are all as available as they are at the information system sites. So every member is responsible for their own service availability. For integrity, you need to have, if you're using data from another authority, you must be able to use it for your own business process. You must not be, it must not be needed that you would go to recheck it over a paper that is signed. You must have it digitally in a way that you can use it for your decision process. You can make your own business decisions based on this data that you have received over X-Road. Confidentiality is a tricky thing. Confidentiality is keeping something from happening interviews of third parties. This is something that in a peer-to-peer network seems maybe awkward, but is actually essential to define and protect. But let's not go into details. So, having implemented this kind of e-governance ecosystem with X-Road, with eID, with ISKE, with RIHA, with all of the enablers that we have in the Estonian e-governance systems, some things that we have figured out seems like good lessons. So in this sense, my always recommendations are that if you want to make the same good mistakes that everybody else is making, do the same things. If you don't want, then try to learn them. First of all is think horizontally. Everybody in all governments are thinking already vertically, that every ministry, every authority is responsible for their business flow and for their regulation. Think horizontally means in these terms, for example, in terms of X-Road, that it is X-Road specialists' business and responsibility to figure out how securely exchange data. None of the other authorities have the requirement or necessity to think about this kind of thing, how to securely exchange data over public internet. So this is a responsibility with the X-Road team in State Information System Authority. Have a distributed architecture. Having a distributed architecture means that you have a lot of places, you have the mess. And by definition, some projects, some services won't turn out to be as good as you expect. So some of these things will fail. And it's normal. I think it's Pareto principle, or whatever you can think of. They all support this idea. If you are going to implement e-governance, as was in the banana plantation or just one big system, it will fail, because something in it will fail, and if it's too tightly together, this is the single point of failure, and if you have only one point, it will fail altogether. Figure out the governance and responsibility of the mesh. due cooperation with different kind of partners. This is something we haven't figured out. This is a lesson still we are struggling. We have the interoperability, but we very much don't have the will to interoperate. So this is something, how to deal with it, because all the legislation is vertical. The legislation doesn't support actually interoperable solutions. And what is something that usually you don't speak Estonian, hear Estonian speaking of, is that at some point of time, both Estonian X-Road and Estonian eID as a digital identity provider or service have been considered as a failed project. Why that? Because something was expected of them too soon. It was expected within the first 2 or 3 years that X-Road would make some kind of big change. No, it didn't. It took in Estonia 4 or 5 years to start to make any difference at all. So you shouldn't be expecting anything happening in first year, in 2 years. Of course, pilots are needed. Pilots are the things that say that it's still sustainable, it's still usable. But for all the enablers, some sort of ecosystem is needed, some time is needed to settle them. So, everything, puzzle solved, right? No, 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 no. There is still something that is missing. So just as I arrived to Stockholm this morning, there are like thousands of people from Estonia going to work in Finland and vice versa, and I think there is even more people working and living across the Finnish and Swedish border. So this question is that the e-governance system has to define the subject of cross-border services, right? Agree? Not agree? Even if you don't agree, I still will talk about it. So what does it mean to cross the border? And this is now something I learned from the Finnish colleagues that we have been co-developing the X-Road with for the past 2 years, is that while I was thinking of cross-border as cross-country border, then Pauli Kardana was the guy from Finnish Ministry of Finance who said that no, wait, Heiko. We have borders between our ministries. We have borders between our sectors. We have borders between our security domains. So there is a lot of borders that has to be crossed. Now the question is how different organizations, information systems, how they are governed in both sides of the border. And in order to do this, I think the assumption that has to be made, or at least I have made for myself, is that X-Road is, by its definition, an interoperability solution. It is something that is how one organization crosses the border to another organization. And it's not actually so much different than those organizations would lie across a country border or ministry border. There isn't. The biggest border has already been crossed by this time. So in this level, what we have seen, and we try to push into the EU different projects and commissions discussions, is the understanding that cross-border situation has to be dealt on at least 2 levels. First is that on a governance level, you have to settle how to agree trust across the border. But then the business content is still handled by the authorities, so they still must have the responsibility to deal with the access rights and business content and how it is delivered across the border to some other ecosystem, to some other country. Having these things in mind, we had a gut feeling that it will become an issue in upcoming years, and we have created X-Road in a way that it would, by definition, by its way, how it's built, would support this kind of federated trust model of how cross-border services can be implemented. We are currently this autumn looking for ways, as X-Road has been deployed now in Estonia and in Finland, we are looking for actual business cases that would make the actual first cross-border services that are not international by design, but that are national by their design. So in this sense, we are very eager. We have some organizations in our site that we are discussing about what kind of data can be exchanged from Estonia to Finland, and there is no European or I don't know, whatever kind of infrastructure or organizational method in between. Because the idea is that while I was also physically traveling this morning to Stockholm, there wasn't a place at any time of this travel that I would have been outside of Estonia and not yet inside of Sweden. So as soon as I came across the border, it was clear, am I on this side or the other side? There isn't such thing as EU. It doesn't exist. It's a metaphor, right? EU is composition of countries, but the countries' borders are close together. There is no gap between. So having this in mind, the extra way of having cross-border services using a federated trust model, I think, could be a way of how to deal with cross-border aspects also. So, back to the beginning, which means I'm almost in the end of my speech. As I told you, the once only seems reasonable principle. But what we figured out in Estonia is that it's not something to discuss about. It's an essential thing. This is not to figure out, should we do it or should we not? Is it effective or is it not? We don't have the resources. We have to do in ways that we would trouble citizens the least. The tricky part about this queue is that we don't want the citizens of Estonia to spend their time queuing for some authorities to provide papers. We want them to actually live their life, do business, make culture, make kids, raise them. If they are naughty, punish them also, maybe. These people on the picture are families who have queued in, now I don't know the actual word. If the boys turn 18, they go to the military service. And it is 1 month after they have entered the military service that the families can visit them. So this is the queue. Families wanting to be together, and very good queue. Let them be there, because there is a family spending best of their time. So in this sense, my bottom line for today's presentation would be that it's not a thing about asking or receiving information and data from a citizen once, but in order for them to allow them to live their lives fully, for all the data that has been already gathered, it must be reused, reused, and reused in the distributed architecture. So at least twice, I would say, is the keyword. If somebody is collecting data and it is not reused, then this data is not useful. So reuse the data that is already in the governmental sector, and let this be the growth of good business services in the public sector. So I stop here. I don't know what the time is. I hope it's not yet lunchtime, right?
It's not yet lunchtime,
okay.
not yet.
Thanks.
And we have some questions for you, and I will have some help from our next speaker, Shahyan Khan. Yes, please welcome up. Give him a warm applause. Shahyan Khan is working with digital transformation and also governance at Pink Mango Capital Partners, and you will talk about digital transformation after the break.
Yes.
And when you've been listening to Heiko, what are your thoughts and your reflections?
I mean, I've been, thank you for the presentation, by the way, and it's a marvelous system. I've been following it for many years. And I actually have a couple of questions, if I can direct them at you, that I was thinking about. I mean, as you all know in this room, Sweden is considering this as a program for us to have in our backbone. And we know that you're doing this with Finland, for instance. Can you just comment a bit on the kind of progress and challenges that you've seen during these 2 years of implementation with them?
Maybe the shortest answer would be that that all the flaws that we made more than 10 years ago with introducing Digitalt, the Finnish guys are doing exactly the same thing. So they are following our path directly.
Okay.
Although we have recommended or made suggestions on how to avoid them, but this is like their first 2 years. It still needs time for the ecosystem to grow. No very fast and good wins in this spectrum, but it's the wins are coming like after the 5th of year maybe. So in this sense, I've seen that they are doing a very good job on getting organizations on board X-Road, and they have done marvelous job on actually, in some sense, they are a few years ahead of us. So in this sense, I think Finnish government has done really good on this.
And with that, thank you for mentioning cooperation, because I mean, if we look at the Swedish model right now, it is a semi-destructuralized system that we have. And if you think about the more than 350 kind of government agencies that we have, how have you been working with this during all these years, kind of to get those together? Because that is going to be one of the main issues in kind of implementing this kind of a system.
As I said, the corner or the heart for this is that as my organization in Estonia is responsible for the secure data exchange layer, then in Finland there has been picked VRK as the population registry center that as a side business now is responsible for the Finnish instance of X-Road. So we are the two authorities defining how securely exchange data across public internet, and we are helping all of the other authorities not to think about this. So they would have the possibility to think only how to improve their business service. They don't have to think about, they must not think even about how to do this kind of secure data exchange. So this is having this kind of responsibility consolidated at one hand, but yet the business responsibilities are all across the country.
Okay. I have one final question, and it might be a bit more, it's a more personal one for me. I mean, already in '96, I know that Estonia went through a very strong, kind of cybersecurity hack of the central super database that happened. And I know that now you have a decentralized system, et cetera, during the years that you developed it. But have you gone through those kind of security risks like we were talking about that goes towards public trust, like we were talking about this morning, with second opinion groups that come in or do grey hat hacking or those kind of things? And just for the audience, grey hacking is when you allow a group to come into your organization, try to hack it, and also prove you with what you need to do to kind of be more secure, and that can be done by a security company or grey hacking groups. Have you tried that? Because I mean that will be one of the main concerns coming.
Okay. While I would answer it a little bit around the corner, right?
That's okay.
As X-Road is the one that is allowing secure data exchange across different organizations, then it's like having a really good security door on your house. But X-Road doesn't say that you have good walls.
No,
right?
Exactly.
So in order to have good walls for your house, to keep the secure stuff inside safely, the other enabler is e-SCA. That is the baseline security mechanism that is compulsory for all public authorities to use. So this is something that I would say is the second side of having this information security in place. Methodology, how to implement security in your information system, how to audit, how to supervise, how to maintain it. So this is like, this has to be a regular job in every organization. It cannot be like a project-based or just, well, we make some sort of a group effort now. So information security has to be a constant concern. And while e-SCA is saying how to keep stuff secure in-house, then X-Road is the way how to securely exchange it with others. We have, I think the idea for your question, or at least for what me seems the principle is that how you make people trust those digital information systems if there have been different kind of incidents. It's not my words, but I have to reuse some of my colleagues' words, that it's showing the vulnerabilities. If we have had instances in a few years back, starting from 2007, then these haven't been hidden. These have been published. These have been put on the table to say that this kind of incident happened. This kind of threats occurred. This kind of bad things happen. So being public, showing the weaknesses also is actually a strength. Just as most likely you have heard about the last incident with our national e-ID card that happened with a chip failure. So it wasn't hackers, private companies or anybody else that had come out with it, but the Prime Minister came out and said that we have this kind of vulnerability and we are dealing with it. So being public, opening, being transparent is one part of it.
I would like to end with the main question. Is X-road the right road for Sweden? And then I would like to address that question to the audience. Ni kan öppna era telefoner och svara just på den frågan, så ska vi ladda upp den här på skärmen. Vad tror ni? Är X-road rätt väg för Sverige att gå? Är det tveklöst så? Är det troligen en bra väg? Är ni mer osäkra, eller är det så att vi bör ta en annan väg? Is X-road the right road for Sweden? You can see here at the screen. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, probably. No, I'm not sure. Or no, we need to take another road instead of X-road.
I would rephrase the question in this sense. At least, I think one of the most crucial questions is that is distributed architecture the way how to implement e-governance? Secondly, X-road is just one implementation of some of the functions of a distributed architecture. So I think the question is twofold. First of all, is it a distributed architecture you want to go? And then, if it is distributed architecture, could X-road be the technical solution? So I think this could be split into two. And well, I'm still optimistic and think that having different kind of buzzwords around like cloud and blockchain and whatever these magnificent words are, then I still believe X-road has its place, and it will be backbone for the Estonian e-governance system.
But we have some politicians that would like us to go the X-road, and we also can see at the screens that the audience, they are positive.
Very
Not
good.
all are just absolutely positive, but they think, yeah, maybe this can be a good way for us. From your perspective, does Sweden have the right requirements of succeeding if we choose the X-road?
I would have to answer that the same enablers that I have on my slides. It's the question about, are these enablers all set? Because what we saw in Estonia and what we are seeing now in Finland also is that those enablers work together. So that we haven't been able also to master some of those enablers ourselves, but in combination they provide a good platform for e-governance. So the readiness of Sweden is about how is the service catalog health, how is the API management, how is information security management done, how is the identification and responsibility shared. So if these questions can be responded and answered that, yes, we at least know what to do, then I think altogether this can be a good bunch of work.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us. Give him a warm applause.